This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, it certainly is. And let me turn on my camera and again say welcome. My name is John Meredith. I'm one of the trainers here at Sumo Logic. I am based on the US East Coast, specifically Bedford, New Hampshire, in case you're wondering, about an hour to an hour and a half north of Boston, Massachusetts, in case you're wanting to drive up here. Depending on where in Boston you are, it could be an hour, it could be an hour and a half. So anyway, that's why the sun is going down right now, and so that's why I've got some lighting on to so otherwise the room's not pitch black dark. Anyway, want to welcome you to class. I'm your instructor, and my only ask as your instructor is, as we go through the material, if you've got questions, please ask your questions. That's all my ask is. I'm assisted today by Odell Gordon. Odell, you want to say hi, sir?
Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning to all of you. Welcome. John has a plethora of information and knowledge. Please ask questions, make it fun and fundamental. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Okay, I'm going to stop the streaming video here, just turn the camera off so you guys can focus on the material that's in front of you. So today we're going to focus on Sumo Metric Analyst. Again, Tuesday, for those of you who attended the class, you kind of got a harbor tour of what is Sumo Logic and why would I care? What can Sumo Logic do for me? And the focus is a little bit on dashboards, a little bit on dashboards and queries and things like that. Yesterday in the Search Mastery class, we really focused on log queries, going after our log data and creating and writing queries. We learned about a bunch of different functions for that. Today, we're going to focus on the Sumo Metrics Analyst. We're going to create metric queries, not log queries, but metric queries. And we'll talk about the power of doing that and what that can do for you. So our focus today is metrics. And if you didn't attend either of the other two sessions, you're fine. You'll be able to adapt. Okay. A couple of things, we're going to do some review, some basics that we talked about yesterday and the day before. So bear with me while I rehash some stuff. And then we're going to talk about collecting metrics and how we go through that. In this class, we are actually going to set up a collector. So those of you who have heard about a collector, we set it up in this class. We also set it up in the administration class. And then we're also going to take those metrics and we're going to collect them in. And we're going to show you how to analyze those metrics. And we're going to go through a series of use cases where we can look at our metrics. We can compare it against AWS metrics and other things. And in short, we'll play with the metric tool. Then we'll wrap up the course, and then we'll talk about and give you an hour to do the certification exam. So the certification exam is optional, but we encourage you to take it. In fact, not only do we encourage you to take it, as most of you know, if you take it and you pass it, we recommend that you fill out this link. We have a link here that I will provide you when we get around to the certification exam, that if you fill out that link, we'll send you a $15 Uber Eats voucher. Now, part of that link includes a section where we'd like you to attach your certification. So when you take your certification exam, I'll show you where you can see your certification certificate, and you can screen capture that and paste it. But some of you in your companies are not allowed to upload files into this Google form. If that is the case, don't worry about the form. Just go ahead and fill out the form, but you can submit it, and off to the races we will go. We typically turn around the Uber Eats vouchers in about 48 hours. So if you do take the exam, pass it. And by the way, another thing, while you're taking the exam, this last hour of class, both Odell and I will be here to answer any questions in case you get stuck. Our goal is simply to help you get certified. Okay, we're on your side. So, but if you don't have the time to take it or whatever, you don't have to. Nobody's going to hold a gun to your head, please. So let's talk a little bit about demo and data flow and what Sumo Logic is. Some of you have heard this before, but our focus is going to be predominantly on metrics. So what's a metric? Well, a metric typically is a value that measures a value of something, and typically it's something over time. So it's a series of data points that measure the value of something over time. I want to see my CPU utilization. I want to see my disk drive utilization, my network traffic utilization. I want to see my employee churn, something that you can measure over time, right? I want to see how my financials are doing, something you want to measure over time. It tends to be numeric and it tends to be over time. So again, everyday metrics, as you can see here, right? We can check our weight every week. No, thank you. Okay. You can check the height of your child every 6 months. That's kind of a fun one. But we'll typically use these metrics to see how we are doing, how we are performing. So we typically look at metrics that are important to us, and we call those key performance indicators, or KPIs, right? So again, most companies track their financial, their revenue. How am I doing on the revenue side? Some companies track their cost. How am I doing on that? Some companies track their HR activity, my churn, my hiring, things like that. Some companies look at their customer satisfaction scores. So there's a lot of key performance indicators that you can track. If you're in the IT department, chances are some of the key performance indicators you're going to track are how are my servers doing as far as uptime, my SLA, am I maintaining my software licensing agreement with my customers, if you will. What my CPU utilization is and stuff like that. So those are some examples of how we use metrics. Chad, you said you can't see my screen. I assume everyone else is seeing the screen. Yeah, you may want to come back, step out of the room and come back in, but you should see it. So I'm going to pause for a half second to give Chad a chance to pop out and hopefully pop back in. All right. Let me go ahead and continue
if
on.
it doesn't work on,
I'm sorry?
If it doesn't work on a computer, though, he can try his mobile device.
That's true. He certainly can. Absolutely. Assuming he has a mobile device, but most people do. So yeah, I got you. So when we think about metrics, when we think about logs typically tell us why, metrics typically tell us what's going on. So, okay. Somebody also suggests you can change browsers too. That might also be a help for you. Okay. So thanks for the help, folks. So when I think in terms of wind patterns over the last 24 hours, if I'm looking at south by southeast or north by northeast or whatever, those typically are log entries. Those are not metrics. Now, if I'm looking at wind speed over the past 24 hours, or I'm looking at the count of my wind patterns, then that would be a metric. Okay. Every time the wind exceeds 20 knots, again, that's probably going to be a log entry. If I want to do the count of the times that wind exceeds 20 knots, then again, that could be a metric. All right. Somebody asked, where are the slides in the lab PDFs located? I'm going to show you that in just a little bit, James. So bear with me. Okay. Bear with me. CPU uptime for the last 15 minutes. Again, first of all, I think it's funny, CPU uptime for the last 15 minutes. I hope the CPU has been up for at least 15 minutes. I hope the CPU has been up for a lot longer than that. So again, if I want to see what my CPU utilization is, that's a metric. If I just want to see whether I've been up for 15 minutes or not, that's probably a log entry. If I want to look at failed logins, that's a log entry. If I want the count of my failed logins or the time of my failed logins, those could be metrics. And then the number of server errors on an hourly basis, that one's easily a metric. So just trying to get you to think in terms of the differences between metrics and logs. Okay. Again, those of you who've been in class with us know that we've got the Sumo Logic data flow. And our Sumo Logic data flow starts with collection. We are going to, in this class, set up collectors. And we are going to set up a metric source host so that you can grab and bring your metric data into Sumo Logic. Now, this scenario requires two things. One, it requires you to be able to install software on your computer. You may or may not have that capability. If you don't, you can't do that part of the exercise. But I will install my collectors and my sources so that you can use them in the subsequent exercises. So if you can't install a collector, then you can use my data to do your queries and play around and that sort of thing. So once we get the data into Sumo Logic, and again, my collectors are the highway that the data transfers on. The collectors are responsible for encrypting, compressing, and sending. The sources are the actual sources I'm bringing in, whether they are log sources like the S3 buckets, CloudTrail, network monitor stuff, event logs, event viewer logs, whatever. Those are your individual sources. They could be logs. They could also be metrics. So your Cloud Watch metrics could be a series of metrics you bring in from your AWS environment. You can also bring in your host metrics. So obviously our focus in this class is going to be some sort of a metric here for sources. Once you get those in, you can either write log queries, which we talked about yesterday, or you can write metric queries, which we'll talk about today. And then you can take those metric queries, create visualizations, and then build some dashboards and build some alerts. All of this stuff here we are going to talk about over the next hour and 45 minutes. Okay. So let's talk about collecting metrics. Again, you have two types of collectors. If you're on the web, you're on AWS, Azure, Google Cloud Platform, some software as a service like Salesforce, we use a hosted collector. There's nothing you have to install. There's nothing you have to configure. Done. If you do not have a hosted collector, you will need an installed collector. So if you've got your computer or a computer that you want to send data into the Sumo Logic cloud, you can either install a collector in each machine and then define a source to bring those logs or metrics into the Sumo Logic cloud, or you can set up a centralized or consolidated collector. And then you can have your other machines forward their data to this machine, and it will encrypt, compress, and send to the Sumo Logic cloud. So in our case, the scenario we're going to use is we're going to install local collectors on your computer, my computer, whatever computer, to be able to send data into the Sumo Logic training environment so we can see that data. That is our goal for this class. One of the goals. Again, many of you have had other classes with us before. You've seen this slide before. Again, this is some example of our hosted collectors. Again, you're on the cloud somewhere, dealing with software as a service, SaaS, or you're going to install a collector, in which case you'll install it in each machine you want logs or metrics from. Or as I pointed out earlier, you can set up a machine and install the collector on that machine. Then you can have all these devices forward their logs to this machine. It will encrypt, compress, and send. And that's basically how it works. Now, this particular slide makes a great test question. Okay, I'm not going to lie to you. Makes a great test question. In fact, I'm sure you're going to see it again. By the way, I should also warn you, the test for this particular course is probably the hardest test of our certification series. There's going to be a lot of information you're going to have to look up in our product documentation. So I just want you to be aware. I want to set that expectation up front. Now, as far as metric ingestion, we will obviously ingest the metrics that you send, but we're going to look at the timestamp. If it's more than a week old, we will not accept that metric. We're obviously looking for fresh metrics that we can retain over time. Speaking of retaining metrics, here's what typically happens. We retain your raw metric, whether you send it to us every 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 2 minutes, whatever. We retain that for 7 days. Now, as we retain this, as we bring this data in, at 1 minute intervals, we do a roll-up. We do a min, a max, an average, a sum, and a count on the values that you've sent us. And for 1 minute resolutions, we're going to roll that to a lookup table or a roll-up table. And we're going to retain that for 30 days. And then at 1 hour intervals, we'll also do a min, a max, an average, a sum, and a count. And again, we're going to retain that for 13 months. So if you're writing a metric query and you're going back 12 months, the tightest resolution you can get is within 1 hour. If you want to go back 30 days or 2 weeks, you can go down to within a minute. And if you're within 7 days, you can go down to whatever your time periods are. So however you've ingested it in the raw, you'll be able to see it. That's our metric retention policy. Typically, when we do metrics, you're going to find that we prefer to use key value pairs. Key value pairs. So here's my key. Metric equals, what metric am I looking at? What region equals, what region am I looking at? What country am I looking at? Key value pairs. Now the values are, in this case, metric is wind speed. It's my value. Region equals EU, European Union. Country equals Spain. So again, these are my key value pairs that I want. And if I wrote a metric query with something like this, it would look at all of my weather stations, my wind stations across the country of Spain. And let's say, for argument's sake, that we have 255 stations. We would see the data from all 255 stations displaying my wind speeds. Now, if I added to that city equals Valencia, then it would only show me the however many I've got in Valencia. In this case, we have 3. So by adding another value in here, we have restricted what we can see. Or if I want to see the average results, notice there's a little pipe there, and there's an operator here where I want to see the average. This will then show me the one value, the average of those 3 stations. So here I'm going to have 255 data points. Here I'm going to have 3 data points. Here I'm only going to have 1 because I'm doing an average. Now there's other formats we can take besides key value pair, and I'll get into those in just a few minutes. All right, here we have metric operators. And what I'm going to do, let me stop my slides for just a second. If you went out to our documentation, our product documentation, and you went to help.sumologic.com, that's what's going to get you to our documentation. I want to point out a couple of things. Those of you with me yesterday, I showed you in the Search Mastery class that under search, there were some search cheat sheets that provided you examples of how to use our log parsing and operators and all that good stuff. There was even a PDF version of this that you could use. Well, we've got the same sort of thing for metrics. So let me go back here to the front of my page here. In fact, you'll see we've got a whole chapter on metrics. In fact, I'm going to tell you that most of your answers to your questions in your quiz, your certification quiz, are probably in this chapter. Now, I can go into this metric chapter and I can start breaking it down and I can start reading through it. But I could also go in here and maybe do a search for something like metric operators. And just like we had log operators, we have metric operators. So here in my metric query, so here under metrics, here under metric queries and alerts, here's my metric operators. And these are the metric operators we're going to play with in this class. Additionally, there is a PDF version of this. So you can open up that PDF version if you want to, print it out, share it with your friends, neighbors, fellow coworkers, all that fun stuff. I am going to take this URL just for fun here to make it a little easier for you. I am going to put it in the chat box. Okay. And you can do that from any of our environments. So your company's environment, you can go to our documentation. You can just go to the URL help.sumologic.com and open up a new tab. That's our documentation, and you can get to it anywhere. Okay. All right. So that's our operators. Any questions so far? All right. It's time for you all to log in, but please be careful here. You're not logging in as training analyst like you have for the last couple of days. You're going to log in as an administrator so you can install a collector. So what I'm going to ask of you to do is step number 1, fire up Google Chrome or Firefox and go to the following URL, service.sumologic.com. That's service.sumologic.com. And when you go there, it's going to ask you for an email address and a password. Now, for your email address, I need you to select a 3-digit number that I'd like you to put in the chat box. So Dave and Jay have already added theirs. Pick any 3-digit number you want. I don't care. Live large. You want to be 007? Here's your chance to be 007. Okay. And you're going to log in with the email address of training plus admin, whatever that 3-digit number is. So you're going to replace these hashtags with the 3-digit number you chose at sumologic.com. That's going to be your email address. And then the password for the admin account is capital SECURITY, numeral 2, exclamation mark, security 22, exclamation mark. And because I'm a trainer, I've got to demonstrate, or I will demonstrate. So let me stop my slides for just a minute. Let me go out here. Let me log out of here. Okay. And I want to log in. Again, I went to service.sumologic.com. And back here, I'm going to go out here to training plus admin. And I get to pick whatever 3-digit number I want. I'm going to grab good old 985. Why 985? That was the whole number of the USS Cushing, the last Navy ship I was on in my Navy career. So 985 at sumologic.com. And again, the password, capital SECURITY 22 exclamation mark. And if I click on this little icon, I can see it. And now I can, you can, we can log in. Okay. All right. Now, truth be told, I'm actually going to log out of this. I'm going to click on this account. And again, when you log in, you may see a bunch of tabs open here. We'll clean that up in a minute. You may see this navigation panel open or closed. If you just click up here, it'll open it up. And then down here at the bottom, if you click on this, I'm going to sign out. The reason I'm going to sign out is I'm going to log in with my credentials. My credentials have a little bit more administrative rights than you do. So in case there's a problem, I can log you in. Okay. So my ask of you right now is I want you all to log into our training environment. And when you do that, in the participants box, I'd like you to raise your hand. That way I know that you're in. And if you're having problems, please let us know. Let Josh or myself know. Sorry, let Odell or myself know. Having a rough evening tonight. So, and Yavor and Usha, welcome to class. So what we're doing right now is we're just logging in. And let me also take this information from the slide and let me copy it to the chat. So here's how you can log in. There it is. So Felipe, again, if you need the directions, there's the URL, there's the email. You're going to log in as training plus admin with that 3-digit number you picked at sumologic.com. And then the current password is security 22 exclamation mark. Now that password changes every month. It changes on the first Monday of the month. So when we get around to April and the first Monday of April and we change the password, I don't know what the password's going to be. I don't. I will know when we change it. So if you want to know the password and we change the password, you can send me an email. So in the chat box, I have put in my email address. Okay. And you can play around in our training environment. Now, I am going to ask, because you're going to log in with administrative rights here a little bit, not to delete existing collectors unless you created that collector, right? Don't wreak havoc on our system here. All right. So that's my ask of you. Now let's talk about this. Somebody asked the question earlier, John, where do I see the slides, the recording, and all that good stuff? Great question. So when you log in here to Sumo Logic, and on this house tab here, you can click on certification. And under certification, you click on get certified. Now this takes us to our learning management system. And I will see boxes here that you won't see yet, okay? We don't want you with a training admin or analyst accounts to be able to do self-paced training. So again, Kirsten, when you log into your company's environment and you click on certification, get certified, and it takes you here, you'll be able to see this box, and here you'll be able to click in here. And if you want to, you could take this fundamental self-paced course or the search mastery self-paced course. You don't have to wait for the instructor to, guide you through stuff. So that's where our self-paced courses are. And again, in order to do that, you need to be logged in with something other than a training account. So on your company's environment, you could log in, click on the house tab, click on certification tab, click on get certified, and then you will see this option. Now, again, the question was asked, where are the slides, the recording, and all that? If I go in here to the recorded live training, okay, you'll see here's a whole bunch of our classes. So for those of you who were in yesterday's class, you could go into the search mastery and you could see our slides. And here's a recording of that class that you can play back. And here's our lab guide. Here's our slides. Unfortunately, when we go to the metric mastery class, they did stand this up, but they haven't finished building it out yet. So I have the slides ready for you guys. In fact, if you'll give me a minute, I will upload them for you. So here are the slides generated as PDF that I've uploaded here to the chat box, and hopefully you can access it. If you can't download it from the chat box, again, because your company may not allow that, okay, then let us know. Send us your email, send it to the host and participants, and we send us your email address and we'll email this to you, okay? And hopefully that'll work. But that's how we get the slides, and then the recording, we'll have that stuff up here, like I said, probably by Monday. So, because one of the things I got to do is get this thing fixed. All right. Then clicking on the Get Certified to take the exams. Have I been doing it the wrong way? Okay. No, Blessing, you haven't. You've been right on. So Blessing says, you know, I've been clicking on this Get Certified. Let me go back here to where it says Get Certified. This Get Certified is exactly where you and I take our certification exams. So again, this is our self-paced course area. This is the recordings of our classes. And here is where you would get certified. So Blessing, you're right on. This is exactly correct. This is where we're going to go later today to take our exam. Absolutely. Okay. And I'll come back and revisit that at the end of the class. All right. So again, appreciate the questions. Just want to make sure we're good shape here. As far as becoming an expert, those are self-paced courses. Okay. And after taking the self-paced course, you can take the exam. So again, just to be more precise, this Become a Sumo Logic Expert, those are the self-paced courses. This Get Certified is where the certification exams are. Right now, if you're logged in as a training admin account, you won't see either of these. Why? Because when somebody gets certified or they take a self-paced course, we want to know who's doing it. We don't care that, you know, training admin doesn't mean anything to us. We want to know it's John Meredith. We want to know it's Odell Gordon, so we can track and see what companies folks are getting certified, and when, you know, ask them what they think of our courses, and, you know, follow up and things like that. So hopefully that all makes sense to you, and hopefully that answers the question that was asked very early in the class. I believe it was James's question. All right. So I'm going to assume that you're all logged in. Let me go into participants here. I see lots and lots of hands up. If you're not logged in, if you're having a problem, please let us know. Please let us know. Okay. Because this is going to be pretty much a hands-on exercise situation. There's lots of stuff. I'm going to go ahead and lower all the hands, and we are going to go find our labs. Now, somebody pointed out to me earlier that, gee, John, here's my home tab. Gee, here's the Learn page. And Odell pointed out to us on the first night in the Learn page, here's the fundamental labs. Well, where are the Search Mastery labs? And oh, by the way, where are the Metric Mastery labs? Well, they're actually in our documentation. So again, I meant you could fire up a new tab and go to help.sumologic.com. You can also open up to your navigation panel where it says Sumo Logic here, and you got this hamburger menu or stack of pancakes. You can click up there and open this window up. And in this window, if you click on Help, under Help, you can click on Documentation, and that will take you to our documentation. Here in our documentation, under where it says Start Here, Quick Start Labs and Tutorials, here are where all of our hands-on labs are. This is where all of our hands-on labs are. In fact, if I look for the hands-on labs Metric Mastery and click on that, here is where we are going to start for our class right now. And again, I'm going to copy this and put this in the chat box. So in case somebody gets stuck, okay? Wouldn't raise a hand, but I'm in now. Okay, no problem. Thank you, Ivor. Appreciate that. And if I mispronounce somebody's name, I do apologize. Blessing, is there a question, ma'am? You raised your hand. Is there a question?
Oh, yes. Sorry, I never knew I was muted. I clicked on Get Started with Search, and
Yep.
I can't find the labs.
Okay.
Get,
Okay.
get,
Okay. So you went into documentation, right?
yes.
Okay. And under the first chapter, start here. There should be something called Quick Start Labs and Tutorials.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
No problem. Or also just make it easy. You can click on that link I just put in the chat box,
Okay.
whatever you want. Yeah. Now, if you all did click on that link to get to the labs here, specifically the Metric Mastery Labs, I recommend if you're running Google Chrome to right click on this tab in Google Chrome and pin it. And you can also pin your Sumo Logic tab down. Why? So that you can switch back and forth between these tabs very easily. That's the only reason. Okay, it's an aesthetic thing. So it sounds like everybody's in. I'm going to pause here for a second to see if anybody's having any problems. If you are, again, let us know through chat. Let us know through your microphone. Let us know there's an issue. Otherwise, I'm going to move forward. So we talked about that there's such a thing as collectors. We are going to install a collector. If I click on this introduction to Metric Mastery, the introduction just tells you how to access the training environment. And normally when people want to take this on their own, they send an email to training@sumologic.com requesting an admin account. And I actually respond back to that and give them an admin number to use. I give them the login credentials, but you have that. You're all logged in as training admin, some crazy number at sumologic.com. And you know the password is security22 exclamation mark. So that's going to take us here to lab 1, where we're going to start doing some work. So in lab 1 and in lab 2, what we're going to do is we're going to install a collector and we're going to create a source. Okay. Now, again, as I mentioned, some of you may not have the ability on your computer to install software. And if you don't, you can't do lab 1 and there's no sense in doing lab 2. But you can use our information for lab 3, 4, 5, 6, and everything else. So if you want to install a collector, you can. If you don't want to install a collector because you don't want to send your metric data to Sumo, that's fine too. But I want to give you the benefit if you want to go through the mechanics of installing a collector to see how easy it is. I'm going to give you that opportunity. Okay. By the way, the last lab in here, lab number 10, is where you delete your collector software and you delete your collector. So it cleans things up. So again, when we're done, we'll wrap it, clean it up so that you're no longer sending information to Sumo Logic from your computer. Okay. So here we are once again here in lab number 1. Hopefully you are with me here in lab number 1. You're looking at what I'm looking at. And the first thing it wants us to do is it wants us to go into our Sumo Logic training environment. And it wants us to go to manage data collection. So here we are in our Sumo Logic environment. Click on manage data. Again, if the panel is not open, click where it says Sumo Logic, the hamburger, open it up. You want to go to manage data. You want to go to collection. Up here are our existing collectors. We want to click add a collector. And when you click add a collector, you get a choice, installed collector or hosted collector. You would like to choose installed collector. You're not on a cloud. So we're going to say installed collector. When you click on installed collector, you'll see you've got a couple flavors of Linux collector that you can install, some flavors of Windows, 32-bit or 64-bit. I hope by now you're all running 64-bit machines, okay? If you're running a Mac, you can run the Mac, or if you're running Unix, here's the binary package for your Unix environment. Is there a question?
Please, you were too fast for me. So sorry.
No problem. I'm too fast for one. I'm probably too fast for somebody else too. So I appreciate you telling me to slow down. So again, here we are in lab 1. In lab 1, it says download the collector package. It says sign in the training environment. Go into manage data, go into collection. Again, manage data, collection. Then back to my directions. On the top right corner, click add collector. Go out here, click add collector. And we're going to choose installed collector. Again, as I go through my documentation, it tells you to grab an installed collector. And then pick for your computer's operating system the right collector. Now, in my case, I'm on a Mac. So I'm going to grab the Mac OS and I'm going to go ahead and download that. So obviously mine's already downloaded. Hopefully yours is downloaded as well. Are we all caught up and are we all good? I'm going to take your silences. We're in good shape. Okay. Usha asked a really good question. What's the difference between an installed collector and a hosted collector? Usha, if you're on the web, if you're dealing with an AWS environment, an Azure environment, if you're dealing with Zoom, if you're dealing with software as a service systems like Salesforce or whatever, those are going to use hosted collectors. We maintain those collectors. Those collectors are part of the environment. You don't have to install anything. That's what a hosted collector for. It's for cloud environments. An installed collector is for on-prem or physical machines. That's when we use an installed collector. Usha, does that answer your question? Okay, thank you. Again, one thing I have learned through the years, when somebody asks a question, probably somebody else in the room has the same question. So I appreciate that. James says this collector would get installed on my laptop. Yes, right now it's just downloaded, James. It hasn't been installed, but yes, ultimately we're going to install it. If you don't want to install it, you don't have to. I'm just showing you how you can do this. Okay. So I've downloaded it. I can close this up. Now, here in my case is where it downloaded. It downloaded to my downloads folder. I can double click on this. Here is my collector app for my Mac, my installation here, if you will. I can double click on this and it says, are you sure you want to open it, right? Typical security of an operating system. Yes, I want to open it. Thank you. And it's going to sit there and run its installer. Now, I've got to confess to you all that it's probable that this is going to throw an error when I first run. I'm not sure why on my computer, the first time I install it, it throws an error. The second time it installs clean, but the first time it just throws an error. But I told it to go ahead and start the installation process. And it says, okay, if you want me to install something, I need the password for your computer so you can install this software. And I'm here to tell you, we at Sumo take passwords very seriously. All right. So a lot of characters there to type. In fact, I managed to mistype it. So hang on a second. There we go. So now this is going to launch my setup wizard. Now let's see what's in the chat box here. Okay. So somebody asked the question here, Yever, and I hope I pronounced that right. Is the endpoint for the collector the same for training and operational collectors in the company using Sumo Logic? Yes, it is. Yes, it is, Yever. Yep. No problem. And I'll also show you if you want to adjust it, you can, but that's a new story. So here I am. I've got my setup wizard ready to run, and hopefully you've got your setup wizard ready to run. And so let's have a party here. So what I do is I'm going to click next, and I've got the world famous license agreement. Of course, I'm sure you all want to read that very carefully, but ultimately you have to accept the agreement to be able to move forward. So click next, and now what it's going to do, it's going to see if I have a collector on there. If I do, it's going to uninstall the previous version, and it's going to install a new version. So in my case, it's uninstalling the previous version. Now it's installing the new version. And if this happened like it did this morning, yes, it did, it's going to throw an error. So again, it's some quirky thing with my machine. I click next. There's my error. I'm going to tell it to quit. And I'm going to run this again. This time it'll run fine. Okay, I don't know what it is. I'll look into it, but I noticed it this morning. I double click. Again, my collector starts the installation process. It's going to ask me for my password to be able to install the software. So I'm just going to get ready for that. Okay. So yeah, okay, gotcha. I understand, Yever. So here's my password. And again, let me type it in. And again, here's my setup wizard. License agreement. Next. It's going to uninstall the previous version and it's going to install the new version. And this time it should not throw me an error. Now, one thing, when
Hey,
you're
John.
when yours is done, I want you to hold. Stop where you are. Yes, sir.
If uninstalling previous version takes a while, do we just cancel it and redo it?
It's possible that maybe your VPN in or something, so it's having a problem with resolution. I know Odell had issues with that. So yes, you can cancel it if you want to, but I suggest you try to wait it out.
I've been waiting for like 5 minutes.
Okay, then yeah, cancel it and try it again. Okay. So here we are in this summary, and here's some of my settings. Now, I can go into advanced settings, and for my collector name, it's going to use my host name. I realize you don't know this, but this is actually my host name. So I use that as my collector name. That's fine with me. That's cool. In fact, that reminds me that I need to delete my collector from this morning's session. Just bear with me a second here, folks, while I do this. Otherwise, I'm going to have a problem. Okay. I want to clean that out. And then I can specify a host name. I can specify some category information, description. I can throttle how much CPU it can use. It only uses about 1% of my CPU and my memory, so it's not a big deal. Under URL, here's where it's going to, my default URL to take it in to all of these environments. I could override that if I need to for API purposes or whatever. You can control that. If you're going through a proxy server, this is where you'd set up your proxy information. And then you can also have it install your sources from a JSON file. We're going to install one source in lab 2, and we'll do that manually. So we'll tell it to add sources later. We're going to leave the default setting. And then the next question is, this collector, this software, does it run as, in my case, I'm on a Linux machine, right? Mac, or as root, or if you're on a Windows machine, does it run as administrator? Or maybe I want to run it under somebody else's credentials, okay? So you can decide what credentials you want to use. In my case, I'm not changing any of these default settings, okay? I'm not. And when I click next, it's going to take me back to where I was. Okay. All right. Somebody's asking about uninstallations. Again, Felipe, I'm not sure. Are you on a Windows machine or are you on a Mac? What do you want, sir? The reason I mention it, the reason I ask, okay, Windows machine. Then you would go into your, Windows control panel, add remove programs, and you can remove it from there. But in your installation, where it installs it, bear with me a second, you will find that there's an uninstaller that you can use. So in the case of my Mac, it's here under application, and here's my Sumo Logic collector, and there's an uninstaller app that I can run to clean it up. On the Windows machines, you also have an uninstaller app that you can run to clean it up manually if you want to. Okay. All right. Now back to this. When I click next, and I want you to click next to follow along, it asks me, do I want to use token or do I want to use an access key? When we set up a collector, the collector is going to compress information. It's going to compress it either using a token or it's going to use an access key. So what's the difference? A token, when you generate it, is a one-time, one-use thing. An access key can be used over and over and over again. Where do I get these token and access keys? We're going to go back to our Sumo Logic environment. So we're in our Sumo Logic environment. Up here where the collectors are, you'll see it says access keys and it says tokens. Now we're going to use an access key. So I'm going to click on access key, and down here it shows me my current access keys. This is very much like an AWS access key. It lets us, we're going to use it for logging and security purposes. And so you want to make sure you selected my access key from collection, access keys. And then here you want to click the add button. And you can give this thing a name. Call it anything you want. I'm going to call it metrics and today's date. All right. If for some reason you don't have access and you need to be on the allow list to be able to access Sumo Logic, then you need to add your domain here. But I'm sure most of you don't have to worry about that. That's a security thing. You should not have to worry about this. When I click create key, now here's a warning. When I click create key, this shows me my access ID. It also shows me my access key. This is the only time you'll ever see the access key value. So once I click done, it's going to be gone away and I can't get it back. So if your company policies are, when you use access IDs and access keys, you got to record them in some password manager or whatever, then now is the time to do that. At Sumo Logic, I don't have that requirement. So here on the access ID, I can click the copy button. I'm going to go back to my installation here where I'm installing my collector. I'm going to choose access key and I'm going to click next. Then I'm going to paste my access ID in. I'm going to go over here to my access key. I'm going to click the copy button. I'm going to go back. I'm going to paste that into my access key value. And then I can click next. And what it's going to try to do is it's going to try to connect to the Sumo Logic environment. And it's going to try to encrypt the data to the Sumo Logic environment. And if it comes back normal, it says I'm done, we can finish. I click finish and I can click done here. Now, just to prove a point, here was the access key I created. If I click on this pencil, you'll see I can see the access ID, but I cannot see that access key ever again, which means if you need to generate a new access key, that's what you got to do. Okay. Yes, Yavav, you're absolutely correct. In a Linux, it's typically a configuration file you got to put in. That's a good point. My apologies. So yes, you're absolutely right. All right. So now what we're going to do is go to our directions, right? We installed our collector. We went through that great wizard. We accepted the license agreement, talked about those lovely settings. We clicked next where we selected access key, access ID and key, and then we went through the process of generating those access IDs and access keys. And then we copied and pasted them in here. Now, the last thing that we want to do is we want to go back to our collection and we want to search for whatever your collector name is. So mine starts JMERIDETH. And I can do a search and there it is. There is my collector. My collector shows up green. It is ready to go. It is healthy. Life is wonderful. Okay. Now, the next thing I want to do is install the source, my metrics, and bring my metric data in. That's the next thing I want to do, and that's lab 2. Before I get to lab 2, are there any problems or issues or questions with lab 1 for any of you? Cool. Then let's click on lab 2. Go into our lab, select lab 2, and let's add the source. So here in lab 2, we're going to go back to our Sumo Logic environment. We're going to go into our collector. And again, if you need to search for it, search for it. And under here on the right, there's the word add, a link for add. When you click on add, you can see there's a source or there's a script action to programmatically create your source. We're going to choose add source. When I click add source, you will see here are all the sources that I can have for an installed collector. I can grab local files, local log files, remote log files on other machines if I want, or local to this machine. I can grab my syslog data. I can grab my Docker log data. I can grab my Docker stats data. I can grab script information here, streaming metrics, or host metrics. Now, what we want to do per the directions is we want to grab host metrics. So this last object, we're going to go ahead and click on host metrics, and it brings up some text fields for us to enter things in. Now, I don't care what you name this, but the directions kind of do. So if I scroll down here, it says name, put host metrics underscore your initials. So here we go. Host metrics underscore my initials. Of course, it helps if I spell metrics correctly, huh? This name is not really relevant. The only way you'll see it is as in the source. That's the name of our source. I could put anything I want to there. The description I can leave blank, but I can put a description if I want to. I can define the source host name. I don't have to, but I could if I need to. Source category. This is something we recommend you use as a best practice. And for us, what we want to do for the source category, go to my directions. For the source category, we want to use the phrase host metric, a / and your initials. So, sorry, I keep clicking on that tab. So again, I'm going to find host metrics and / and my initials. If I needed to add some key value pairs, I could do that, but I don't need to. Maybe I want to charge this off to a business unit or something. I could create a field and specify the field name as BU, business unit, and the value is finance or whatever. So if I'm charging this stuff back, it's a way I can search using those metadata tags. It lets me add extra metadata tags. Okay. Yes, Yavar mentions a good point. Having a source category will speed up the request big time. So yes, you do want to take advantage of that. And I'd prefer that you used host metrics / and your initials, because that's going to make it easy for me to do some of the magic that I need to do in some of these labs. Now, the next question is, how often do we want to grab data from this machine? By default, it's 1 minute. You want to go with 1 minute? That's fine. I'm going to go with 10 seconds just because I'm a glutton for punishment. 10 seconds, I'm going to have it scan my metrics and bring them in. Okay. You don't have to change it. You can go with 1 minute. Down here, what metrics do I want to bring in? And I can click on these bubble question marks here to find out what metrics they are. What do they really mean? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab everything. I'm going to check mark everything. Because again, I'm a glutton for punishment. You know, if there's something in here you don't want to share with us, that's fine. Okay. I don't think anything's really sensitive, but again, if you want to not send stuff, that's fine. I would like you to at least grab the CPU information. Okay. Down here, there's something called processing rules for metrics. And for processing rules for metrics, we really don't need to use anything or do anything. But the processing rule for both logs and metrics allows us to write an expression to either exclude certain log or metric information, or I can also hash certain values. So if I'm doing this with a log source and I got credit cards in my logs, if I want to hash those out or mask those out, that's what we use these processing rules for, to exclude that stuff. Okay. All of our sources have these processing rules. I just want to explain it to you. You're not going to use it. And then when I'm happy with this and I'm all got everything checked and done, all we do is add a name, add a source category. I adjusted my scan interval. You don't have to. I selected all of my metrics. Now I'm going to go to the bottom here and click save. Now underneath my collector, I now have my source. Host metrics, JWM, it shows healthy. Here is my source category. And one of the cool things about the source category, next to it is a little blue box. And if I click on that little blue box, it's going to open up for me a query where if I refresh it from time to time, I will eventually get my metric data coming in here. Okay. It may take a minute for it to show up. In fact, I'm going to backspace over the JWM and I'm going to put a star in here, which of course is that global wildcard that says, give me anything that starts with host metrics, just to see if any of your data is coming in here yet or not. Okay. But it will eventually come in. Okay. It's got to be a little patient. So I'll tell you what, since it's trying to encourage me to have patience, if I look at my documentation here, and I basically did all this, including going down here and clicking on this button, and I should see my results, and I'll see them in a few minutes, just bear with me. That takes care of lab number 2. Okay. Yeah, I think we're a little bit behind on sending data. Yep. So what I propose we do here, folks, let's take a 5-minute break. So what I want to do is I'm going to set my timer here for 5 minutes. And when the timer gets down to 0, I'd like you to be back. But let's take a break right now, unless there are any questions. Not hearing any questions. So let's take a 5-minute break. And when this timer gets down, we'll resume class and we'll see if that data is showing up. Okay. So I'm going to step away for a minute and I'll be back here in just a little bit. If you got any questions, we will gladly share that. Felipe, you want my email address again? You're certainly welcome to do that. Let me grab it from an earlier chat. And I will make sure you guys have it. So I'll add that in. Thank you, Felipe.
John, does it usually take a while for data to show up?
It can take a few minutes, yeah. I'm surprised it's taken as long as it is, to be honest with you. I expect it to be a little quicker.
What I'm seeing, like in step 2, when we do the, when we set up the host metrics.
Yep.
It's taken a while for me to actually find that setting.
Okay. Like I said, let me just go back here. It does take a few seconds to load. Okay, I'm surprised I'm not getting any results here. I'm really kind of surprised I'm not getting results now. But it is probably taking a few minutes. Let's give it a little time. Okay. I'm wondering if also somebody's playing around in our environment, the training environment, doing some maintenance or something like that. So I'm just curious to see what in the world is going on. Okay. So like I said, let's take that break and let's respect the clock and let's come back and visit this in about 3 minutes and 20 seconds. Okay. Okay, we are back, hopefully. And just want to now, let's go back here again into my collector. And let's try to click on this again. And when I click on this again, now all of a sudden I'm starting to see some data. I'm starting to see all of my metrics. And if I get rid of the JWM, because all of you were supposed to put as your source name host metrics / something, I replace that with a wildcard. Hopefully now I see some of your data coming in, but not yet. Okay, fair enough. I can try your specific values here. So I can look for, there's somebody else's data coming in. So bottom line is that means that exercise 2 is good to go. And we are in fact ready to rock and roll here. Okay. So I put my star wild card in and I can see here's stuff off of my host. If I look around, here's stuff off of Logger. Here's stuff off of JEP. All kinds of stuff here that I can see where stuff is coming from. Okay. So we're getting data in, and that completes lab number 2. Are there any questions about lab 1 or lab 2? Well, let's go ahead and let's look at metrics. And let's write some metric queries and let's go play around. Let's go back to our Sumo Logic environment. I'm going to close up all these tabs. As many of you know, I can close them up individually, but if I click on the 3 vertical dots, I can choose to close all tabs at one fell swoop. And I'm going to do that. Okay. Now in this class, for the most part, everything we're going to do under the new blue button is under new blue, we're going to click metrics. We want to open up a new metric query. And this is what our metric explorer looks like. Now, in my metric explorer, you'll see I've got 2 modes here. I'm in advanced mode. How do I know that? Because it says enter a metric query. And I'm going to be honest with you. If you've been a customer with Sumo Logic for a while, and I'll say over a year is a while, okay, then you remember our old metric explorer. And it looked like this as far as the query. It was very long, very laborious, very much a pain in the neck. And our customers provided us with some wonderful feedback that says, you know, Sumo, you need to make it a little simpler. So we went right back to the development board and we came up with this metric class, metric interface that we use. And we also, if I go over here to these 3 vertical dots, I can switch this back to basic mode. So here in basic mode, I get to pick my metric. I get to pick and filter it by whatever the heck I want to filter it by. I can add my operator. In the old environment, we actually had to know what commands to do and what to type and all that fun stuff. Here, I've got a pick list. So, you know, we have 5 different core values. One of our core values is we are in it with our customers. So our customers gave us some great feedback, and from that feedback, we improved our product. Okay. Now, I want to make sure you guys are all in basic mode. So if you are like me and you enter a metric query here, you want to make sure you click on these 3 dots on the right, and you want to make sure you switch and click on basic mode so that you are in fact in basic mode. Okay. Now, in lab number 3, what we're going to do is we're going to write our first query. So we're going to go ahead in our metric. We get to pick whatever metric we want. The metric we want is CPU load average 15 minutes. So go in here. I can either find it or I can start typing in. The IntelliSense will help me out. And it doesn't matter if you type it in uppercase or lowercase, but I can scroll down and I want to find CPU load average 15 minutes. And I want to select that. Now, I could add a filter, but I'm not going to worry about a filter or an operator right now. I simply want to click on this icon to the right, and I want to run this query. Now, when I run this query, the first question you might be asking yourself is, how much data am I looking at? In this case, I'm looking at my last 15 minutes. Or again, I can change this to a specific date or time range if I want to. Or I can go to custom and I can pick a specific set of dates. So the question is, when I display this on a chart, what is on my x-axis? My x-axis is time. In this case, it's 15 minutes. I want to make it 60 minutes. I select 60 minutes. I rerun it. Now I'm looking at 60 minutes down here. Okay. The other thing is on my preview table, these show me all my individual metrics that I'm seeing. I'm looking at the CPU load average 15 minutes for all of the metrics that we're ingesting, not just my computer, but your computer and the AWS environments and everything else. So if I go through here, I can see what these values are, what the source category is, the source ID, namespace, all kinds of fun stuff. Okay. All my metadata tags. And then if I want to, I can click on chart. The other thing our customers gave us feedback on was, gee, Sumo, it'd be you really need to make making visualizations much easier. We took that to heart as well. So now in this new metric explorer, when you click on chart, it automatically builds for you a visualization. This happens to be a time series. I can have line charts, I can have area charts, I can have bar charts, I can do whatever the heck I want, okay? Pick the visualization that you want. Or maybe what I want is a honeycomb chart. So these are all my different hosts that I have. And if I want to, I can go down here and I can set the range values. So they're color-coded, green, yellow, red. Maybe you want to use a honeycomb. Obviously, a single value in this case isn't going to work. I got too much data for a single value. It's going to say, oh, wait a second, too many objects. If I only had one line in my preview table, a single value would work just fine. So you can, we can very easily go in here and we can adjust what type of chart we want, what color palette we want. We can specify our labels and parameters and all that fun stuff. Here under a display overrides, I can define my properties of my axes. Here's my axes properties, and I can override them if I want to make a complicated combination chart. Here's my legend. Where do I want to show it? How big do I want it to be? By the way, this legend works great. I can use this legend to turn on or turn off certain values. And last but not least, if you act right now, we'll throw in at no extra charge, the JSON section. So in the JSON section, you and I can see the actual JSON code that makes this visualization work. So a lot of companies are standardizing on JSON type visualizations so they can specify their color palette and they can incorporate that code into this. So you can take your code and you can add it right in here directly and modify your color palettes or things that you want. All right. So again, we've got some results here we're seeing, and life is pretty good. Let me go back here, if you don't mind, and catch ourselves up here. Now, what we want to do is I want to find my machine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back here under filters, and I'm going to say source category equals, and then I can see all the different host metrics or all the different source categories that I can use. If you did not install a collector, you're welcome to use my host metrics /JWM. Okay, but you're going to select one of these values and you're going to rerun this. And by the way, let me rerun this for 15 minutes just so my diagrams look a little closer to what you see in the lab guide. And now I am seeing here the CPU load average for just my computer. And there's the one, and there's somebody else's. I'm not sure why I'm seeing that logger, but I'll worry about that later. Okay. In fact, if I want to, I can go in here and I can turn off the logger in my legend. So I'm only seeing, I'm sorry, I can turn off the logger here and see only my data right there. Okay. So I'm looking at some data here and I can see a specific metric from a specific source. Any problems or questions so far? All right, let's add another query. So this is a query, query A. And if I click on this plus sign right here, that's going to add a second query, query B. The next one would be query C, as you get the idea. And here for the metric, I want to use the same metric, CPU load average. And again, if I don't specify any filters, I'm going to get the old spaghetti factory back. There it is, okay? But what I want to do, instead of looking at a specific host, I want to see the average of all the other hosts. So I can click on operator, I can click on average, I can average it if I want to by source category or source ID or whatever. I'm just going to average it by average, period. And I'm going to go ahead and run this. And now I see here's the average and here's my host. So I can see my host is running fairly well below the average. And so you and I can create these lovely visualizations. And then if I want to add this to a dashboard, all I've got to do is click on Add to Dashboard. And so here in this lab, lab 3, we want to show you how to create some simple queries. Okay. And we created this one where we looked at a specific host, and then we looked at the average of all the other hosts. And we see something that looks kind of like this. Any questions? Okay, that takes us to lab number 4. And the best way to create queries is not having to create queries at all. Those of you familiar with Sumo Logic know that in Sumo Logic, if I open up my navigation panel, down here in my main menu, I've got something called the app catalog. And we've got apps for all kinds of things. We'll talk a little later on about AWS Elastic Load Balancing apps and how we can see the metrics there. But for right now, we also have a host metric app. So if I type in host, it filters all of my available apps, and I can install this lovely host metric app. Now, when I click on it, I can see preview of here's my CPU information, here's my disk information, here's my memory information, and I can see samples of what it's going to display for me. And they want us, if you want to click Add to Library, and you can give this thing a name. I'll put my initials in there. I want you to put your initials in there as well. And I'm going to put today's date in here. Only I'm going to put, and I'm actually going to put a 1 at the end of this, and there's a reason why. I've taught this class already once today, so I used 0324. I want to use a different number, so I'm going to put a 1 at the end of it. And then here under my source category, I'm going to type in host metrics / the name of my host. And I can see all the information about my host. Or if I want to be fancy, I can replace it with a wildcard there. And I'll show you what that's going to do in a minute. Under advanced, this is going to save this to my personal folder. And when I click Add to Library in my personal folder now, it's going to add it in. So if I go into my personal folder here and I look for host metrics, and this is the one I just installed. And if I open it up and I look at my host metric overview dashboard, not only am I going to see my CPU average, but I'll see other host information in here as well. Anything that starts with host metrics. So I can see the wide variety of different metrics. There's my metric, there's JEP's metric, and so forth and so on. So when you specify the source category, you specify what data that you want to see. So here's my host metric overview, disk availability, total used bytes, CPU, and then I've got individual dashboards for my CPU, for my dashboards, stuff like that. And these already are written for you. In fact, if I want to look at an underlying query that makes this up, if I click on this button, right just to the left of the filter funnel, I click on this button anywhere in any one of these panels, it shows me the underlying query. There's my underlying query. Now this looks a little different than what we saw here. And the reason it looks a little different is this dashboard was written in our Metric Classic product. Up here in the upper right-hand corner where the three dots are, if you click on it, you can switch to the new Metric interface. And it'll ask you, sure you want to do that? Yes, I do. And now it will put it in that new Metric interface for me. And it's a little easier then to change my visualization properties and poke around and all that fun stuff. If I want to change it back to my classic metrics, I can do that just like I did before, 3 dots. This time I'll choose to go back to the classic user interface. But this is the interface we used to have. And building these kind of queries was very cryptic, and you had to know the right code. This new interface with the drop downs makes it very easy. And that is the point of Lab 4. We installed the host metric app. We saw the results of our host metric app. Here in our host metric app, we can filter and see. We talked about the classic metric interface versus that new metric interface. And I wouldn't be surprised if at some time down the road, the classic metric interface will go away. It will be deprecated. We also talked about how in the new metric interface, you can change your properties, whether you want to see line, bar, area, whatever. You want to see some sort of a pie or donut chart, single value, honeycomb, the color palettes, lots of properties in here that you can play with. As Odell loves to say when he teaches class, you want to take this thing for a test run. You want to kick the tires, run it around the block a couple times, that sort of thing. And so really, because we don't have time in class to cover everything, you want to play with some of these properties and see what happens, okay? And that pretty well concludes lab number 4. So far, our focus has been on writing pretty simple queries, playing around, seeing what's going on. And we're going to do that for the next 2 labs. Then we're going to talk a little bit about other use cases, dealing with AWS information, converting logs to metrics, converting different log formats, stuff like that. So, but before I go there, are there any questions?
Not a question, but we don't have time to actually work on the labs. We're
Okay.
watching, listening, and everything, but I do believe that there is not enough time to work on the labs.
Okay.
It's just like how I feel about it. I'm not quite sure if anyone else feels like this, but yeah.
Okay. I appreciate your comments. Again, I'm trying to get the lecture and labs done in the next, 35 minutes or so. So you have an hour for the exam and all that fun stuff. We wrap up on time. But I apologize. We'll try to see what we can do about making the timing a little bit better. I'm going to assume that most of you are probably in the same boat. You're following along because I'm going at a pretty good clip.
It's very compressed.
Okay.
Very.
Appreciate it. The good news is that you can go through these labs and these steps yourself if you want at your own time.
No,
So hopefully
but
that helps.
I'm good because I have those available,
Absolutely.
so I can do them later.
So I appreciate your feedback. Yep.
Everyone else should do the same though.
Yep. Absolutely. You should do these. And again, it's, ideally, you'd want to do all these exercises and all these labs and all that fun stuff before you take the exam. But you will have enough knowledge to take the exam right after I finish the lecture and labs. Keeping in mind that some of the questions are going to be like, what is the order of precedence for metric operators, right? And so you could go in here and, you could sit and say, metric operators, order of precedence, and find order of operation here. And you can find, hopefully, the answers to the questions that we're looking for, okay? So you'll find that, there are some questions that you're going to see that are going to require you to go through the documentation. And that's what makes this exam hard. I'm not going to lie to you. It's a hard exam. So, all right.
Fair enough.
But I appreciate your comments. I really do. Thank you.
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
I was following along actually trying to do the labs, and I used your same
My initials, JWM, yep.
Yeah, and it came up that it was already in use, but
Okay.
I can't see yours from my terminal here. I
Okay.
can only see mine.
Okay.
It's,
Question, when you used my initials, what did you use it? In the query or when you were creating your collector and source?
for when I was adding the host metrics library,
Yeah,
and I
Okay.
used the host metric data source as slash JVM,
okay, JWM, yep,
JWM,
yep.
and it gave me not it's already in use.
Okay. It's probably because I do have a dashboard that uses that. So yeah, but you still should have been able to do that. Because I've actually got two of them.
My real
I-
question is how come I can't see yours on my side?
Oh, how come you can't see my folder here?
Yeah.
This is being saved in my personal directory.
Okay.
Okay. And so yours is saved in your personal directory. That's why you can't see it. It's not saved in the shared library. Now, what I can do is I can take any of these folders if I want to, and I can share them. This is something you learned in the fundamentals class. You can share them with others, the entire organization, specific roles, specific named users. I'll send it to the entire organization, and I can give you the ability to view and run my dashboard. Or you can also make changes to my dashboard, or you can change permissions to my dashboard if you want. So I can share this, and now you, along with everybody else, if you look at your recents, you should see my folder in there, host metrics, JWM 03241. May have to take it a minute for it to get it, but that's how we can share it. Does that help?
Yes,
And
it does.
And then you can run mine. So yeah, good question. Thanks for asking. All right. Any other questions? I am going to hang on a second. Okay, standardization with these rights. Yep. Yep. I am going to clear out these tabs. So again, I'm going to click on the three vertical dots, say close all tabs is to clean things up. And now I want to do lab number 5. And in lab number 5, we're going to show you some tricks, how you can join metric queries to see the results of them and stuff like that. So what we want to do is we want to create some queries here, looking at our net in bytes and our net out bytes. Specifically, we're looking at the rate of traffic. And we're going to create almost like a join here between these two queries. So we're going to go into Sumo Logic. We're going to grab ourselves a new metric query. Again, I'm in the classic mode. I don't want to be in the classic mode. So let me switch this to the new metric mode. So my lines, my query lines are on top. And again, I want to make sure I'm in basic mode, which I am. It says metric, filters, add operator. That's the basic mode. In a few minutes, we'll get into the advanced mode and you'll see what's going on. So here, what I want to do is in my metric, I want to click in here. And again, I see a nice long laundry list of metrics. And I could start typing in if I want. And I want to find the net in bytes. So I'm going to find net in bytes. I could select this one or this one, doesn't make any difference. But I want to grab my net in bytes, my network in bytes, incoming bytes. And then instead of using a filter, I'm going to use an operator. And in my operator, I want to grab the rate operator. Then I'm going to grab another operator and I want the sum of my rate. And when I run this, I now see I have a single value. And I can click chart and I can see that single value results as a linear chart. Since I have a single value here, a single element, I could also show you what single value looks like. And I could format this and dress it up and all that fun stuff, but I can see what my values are either numerically or as a line chart going across. Okay. Now what I want to do is I want to grab another query. So again, there's a little plus sign out here. I'm going to click on that plus sign. This time I want to see my net out bytes. And again, I could type in net and find out bytes or whatever I want to do. And I'm going to grab the same operators. So under operator, I'm going to grab rate. Under operator here, I'm going to grab sum. By the way, let me close this up to give myself a little bit of screen space here. And let me run this. So now I've got a chart showing me my incoming bytes. I have a chart showing me my outgoing bytes. Wouldn't it be cool if I could see the difference between these two? And that's what we're going to do next. So here I have got a query. This query right here is referenced by query pound or hashtag A. This one is hashtag B. I want to add a third query. And in this third query, I want to take the difference between hashtag B minus hashtag A. The only problem is that when I want to do something like that, I need to be in advanced mode. Right here, I can select the metric. Here, I can select filters, operators. I want a free-formed expression editor. So I'm going to click on this 3 vertical dots. I'm going to switch this to advanced mode, where now I can write my metric query expression. And my query expression is going to be real simple. Hashtag B minus hashtag A. And now when I run this, down here, I see the results of, there's my net in bytes, my net out bytes, and somewhere else down here, I have the difference between my net in bytes and my net out bytes. What I can also do, by the way, is I can also filter them up here. So if I click on A here, it filters and removes that out. It's not even on my legend anymore. I can click on this one, filter it out. So now I'm looking at the difference between my net in and my net out bytes. That's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at that difference. I can see the rate of change difference between incoming and outgoing bytes. I can see my latency, if you will. Okay. And that's the purpose of this exercise. So we can chart our rate of traffic using something like a join, right? So where we're sitting there building this thing out. And that's exactly what we did here through step 7. And then it says finally hide rows A and B by clicking here and here to hide those. And then I just get my results. Now, one thing that we did is we clicked on this advanced button. So we talked about basic mode, where it's very simple for me to grab certain things and filter on certain things and write my queries. Advanced mode allows me, just like a log query, to use a bunch of operators and do a bunch of complex things. In fact, there are some things that you can only do in advanced mode. If I want to use the filter command, not the filter pull down here, but the filter command, I actually have to be in advanced mode. So there are only some things that only work in the advanced mode. But again, our customer said that was too complicated, so that's why we added the basic mode. So what I'm going to do here is, again, it talks about basic query, which I have my drop downs, make it easy, or my advanced mode, where I can type in whatever query I want. And once you switch, by the way, between basic or advanced. So for example, I switched this. I started with this, basic, basic. This was basic. I switched it to advanced. When I go in and grab a new metric search, the last mode I was in is the last mode I will see. So I'm in advanced mode here. If I go back here to basic mode and I add a new log search, the new one will be in the last mode that I was in. So whatever the last mode that you were in, that's how it's going to show up. And you can very easily flip it back one way or the other. Any questions on that? Okay, let's move on to lab 6 then. We're going to use the filter. We're going to filter out some data here. So here in lab 6, what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're in advanced mode. We're going to do all these labs in advanced mode. So again, they want us to grab a new metric. And in this metric, they want to make sure we're in advanced mode. I'm in basic mode, so I want to switch it to advanced mode. Okay. because the commands I'm about to do are only work in the advanced mode. Now down here, again, when I click on enter my metric query, you'll see it gives me all kinds of neat things that I can play with, all kinds of different keys. So if I go back here and I say, I want to grab underscore content type equals my host metrics. And if I run that, it's going to show me all of my host metrics. And I've got lots of them and lots of metrics associated with host metrics. So I've got over 1,000 values here. Now, they want me also to specifically specify that I want to see source category equals my host metrics and my initials. So I want to narrow this down. I want to see everything. I want to see source category equals, and again, I've got a pick list here of source categories that I can use. And so now I'm only seeing my host metrics. And so I'm down to about 500 metrics. Then I can go in here and specify and say, look, I want to see a specific metric. And by the way, I can type it in, start typing in metric. And there you go, metric equals. And then it wants me to grab a specific metric. I think it wants me to grab CPU sys. Yeah, CPU sys. So I'm going to grab CPU sys. And now when I run it, I've got 2 CPU sys values here that I can display on my chart. One is coming from that logger. Okay. I'm going to turn that little logger off. Oops, I'm sorry. Turn the logger off. There we go. So there's my computer. Now, when I look at my computer here, I see that my values range from about 1.4% to about maybe 4%. Okay. I'm not using my CPU much, which makes sense. My system is not using my CPU much. Okay. But I can, if I want to, add a command, add a filter statement. And as you all know from log queries, the way you connect your commands together is with a pipe. So I'm going to type in a pipe and I'm going to say something like filter. And I can specify, and actually I'm just going to go back out here to the documentation to make it easy. Filter, min is greater than a value and max is greater than a value. So here, oops, I'm sorry, here, I'm going to paste that information in. And if I run this, sure, lo and behold, I'm in between 0 and 10. My CPU is fine. If I change it to say something like 3, 0 to 3, all of a sudden it removes it and I see this CPU sys. Okay. The point is, let me just change this up a little bit. Let me look at all of my metrics under JWM there. And let me also let me remove this filter for a second. Just want to check and see my data. So here I've got a filter that's running nice and high. JRA's CPU is running fairly high. If I put my filter back in, and the other ones are running fairly low. If I put that filter back in and I change this to 10, I no longer see JRA's system. It's been removed. If I make this 20, I now should see JRA's system. Why am I not seeing it? Let's make it more than 20. Let's make it 30. There we go. Oh, I see. Because it was greater than 20. There we go. It's less than 30. So you can filter out specific ranges and values that you don't want to see. And that's where you can use the filter command. You can also do something like the average of the filter command. So here, as we continue on, it says, I want to do a filter average greater than 95. So the point is you can write kind of complex expressions of what you're looking for. I want to see where my CPU sys is getting greater than 95% because I want to set up an alert or a problem or whatever. I want to see what those filters, what those hosts are that have this problem. So you can, write a query like this. I will tell you, if you write this query, you probably won't get any results. Nothing's running that hot on our environment. Now, that takes us, in my slides here, to the end of a specific section. And now, we've talked a little bit about how to set up our collectors and sources and play around here a little bit, filtering our results, joining our results, things along those lines. What we want to do is we want to talk about another use case. And that use case is AWS metrics. You might have a bunch of AWS environments and you want to see how they're behaving. Logically, it makes perfectly good sense. So if you want to grab a bunch of AWS metrics, we typically get them from CloudWatch metrics. And so I have a link here that I'm going to put in the chat box because there's another test question based on this link. So if I click on this link, let me stop the document for a second. Let me go ahead and click on this link. This link right here talks about how AWS CloudWatch metrics work. And so services that publish CloudWatch. So a lot of what you might need can probably be gathered from CloudWatch. You want to get your Elastic Beanstalk information for your deployment of new products and stuff like that, your Elastic Load Balancing, all this stuff is part of your CloudWatch metrics. Let me go ahead and copy this and put it in the chat box for you. So you have access. This is from the AWS site, by the way, not from our Sumo Logic documentation. But again, you might see a question or two on this. Now, one of the questions might be, gee, when doing Elastic Load Balancing in an application Elastic Load Balancing, what's the limit of how many metrics you can have? Well, if you click on the document inside here, you can probably find the answer to that question within their documentation. This is why it's such a fun thing to go through and do this exam. It takes you through all kinds of documentation. Also, we also have, again, you can create up sources, a hosted collector to bring in your AWS environment. And then in your source, you can define that I want to bring in my CloudWatch metrics, and you can check what regions and stuff, what systems you want, and it will then start bringing in that data. Pretty simple. Now, a couple things here. It says collecting and analyzing AWS metrics, right? A couple tricks, right? Only send the necessary metrics. Good idea. Don't bring in everything. Choose the right scan intervals. This is a test question. Why do you want to set the right scan intervals? Because if it's too short, it could lead to excessive querying. If it's set too long, it will delay the update frequency of the new metrics appearing in Sumo Logic. This is why you want to choose the right scan interval, and you'll see that in the form of a test question, okay? So EC2, you can save money if you want to use an installed collector rather than a hosted collector, okay? So again, there's some suggestions there, some tips, some tricks. And here in Lab 7, what they want you to do is we're going to query some ALB metrics, some load balancing metrics. We can also install the ALB metric app, and then we can reverse engineer some of the queries that are there. So here in Lab 7, you and I, we do have a bunch of AWS environments that feed this. I can go in here and I can select this line of code, and I want to grab a new metric query, and I can paste this as an advanced query. Now, I got to confess, I don't need the double quotes. The only time I need double quotes is if there's a space somewhere in this. I don't need the double quotes. So when I click on this and I run it, I get my advanced load balancing metrics. I can see them on a chart, see what's going on. I could filter out certain metrics, filter out certain ranges, whatever the heck I want to do. And again, maybe I want to do this as a honeycomb so I can see all my various metrics here. And maybe I want to conditionally format them based on their values, okay? So again, you can set that stuff up. Now, Obviously, there's a lot of metrics here. So let's filter it down. Let's grab the metric where it is my HTTP code ELB5XX. I want to capture any of my 5XX errors. So let me put a space here. Let me put a copy of this puppy in. Let's run it. Now, all of a sudden, I'm down to a few less metrics here, hopefully. There we go, a few less metrics. Again, I can maybe show this instead of a honeycomb. Maybe I'll show this as a series of lines. Okay. Sorry. And then what I can also do is take the average of these. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to type in a pipe and type in AVG for average. That's my average function. And now I'm looking at the average of my 5XX counts across my load balancers. I can also, if I want to, add another query, copy this line, paste it down here. But now what I want to do to this line is I want to add another pipe. I want to say time shift, which lets me pick a different time frame, time shift, and I want to go back 1 day, 1D. So now what I've got are two different charts. One showing me today's activities, one showing me yesterday's activities. So I can see, are things getting better, things getting worse? Here's my 1 day, here's my current. So things are improving. They weren't as busy. Yesterday, they were a little busier. So you can write queries like that using the advanced mode. In fact, I don't think time shift works in basic mode, I believe, but don't quote me to that. Now, where we can write queries here, and that's all fine, well, and good, we can also go out to the Sumo Logic app catalog. And in the Sumo Logic app catalog, we can also find, under our AWS Amazon Web Services, we can find our elastic load balancing metrics. And you and I can install that app. That's part of the directions here. They have you install that app. Now, I've already installed that app. And so if I go into this application load balancing, I can go in here and I can look at my results to see what's happening. I can see my AWS environments here, my elastic load balancing environments. I can, look at my request count per load balancer. I can look at things by, overview here. Here's a nice little overview. Let me select that and show that to you. And I can even take some of these examples, some of these code examples, the underlying query, and I can copy them out and use them myself. One other thing in these panels, we also have filters. I can click on the filter and I can filter these by a specific source category or a specific source if I want, or a specific collector if I want to. So these are parameters that you can add to dashboards and filter by whatever it is that you want to filter by. And in my case, that filter doesn't have any data associated with it. So it's dropping like flies. Okay. All right. Let me get rid of that filter and hit the enter key, and we're all back in business here. Okay. All right. So there's much of built-in apps that you can take advantage of. You can reverse engineer them. You can look at them, take advantage of those queries. And that's one of the tricks we're trying to show. Okay. Now, that's talking about AWS. Another thing that you can do with this product is you can also, when you ingest logs, create the metrics for you automatically. Okay. You can create the metrics for you automatically. So what I want to do here is in Sumo Logic, in my main menu, under Manage Data, under Metrics, I want to talk about metric rules, logs to metrics, and metric transformation rules. Let's start with logs to metrics. Logs to metrics allow us, as we ingest logs, to also then parse out the metrics. And so you could create a new logs to metric rule. I can call this whatever I want. Logs to metrics or something like that. Under the scope, what data do I want to deal with? I'm going to grab my good old Apache access information. Those of you in yesterday and Tuesday's class have seen that. And then also here for my parse expression, I'm going to use a parse regex to parse out the fields that I want. Now I could have used parse JSON, parse anchor, parse whatever, but I'm going to use in this case, this parse regex expression. And when I paste that regex expression in and I tab down, I see it's parsed out my method, my refer, my size, my source, IP, my status code, my URL, and my user agent. And of course, there's your message. Now, of these things, most of these are all text-based. They're not going to be metrics, right? The URL is text. The refer is text. The method is text. The only two things that are purely numeric are my size and my status code. Now, my IP is also numeric, but it's got decimal points in it. So because it's got more than one decimal point, it's going to be treated as a string. So down here, as I scroll down further, I have to tell it what to do with these numeric values. And there's really two choices. I got status code and I got size. Now, my size, I do want it to aggregate. By the way, this word metric should be right here. This word dimension should be over there. Not quite sure why it's not where it is, where it's supposed to be, but it's okay. Now, size is a metric. I want to sum it. I want to average it. I want to aggregate it. It is truly a metric. So I'm going to click on the metric column and identify that numeric value to be treated as a metric. My status code, a status code of 200 means the page rendered fine. A status code of 304 means I received it from cache. These aren't things that I want to sum. I don't want to add up all my 200s or all my 404s. I may want to count them, but that's another story. So I want these treated as more dimensional aspects. They're going to qualify my size. I may want to sum my size by status code, but I don't want to sum my status codes. So any of my numeric fields in here, I've got to decide whether it should be treated as a metric or it should be treated as a dimension, not a metric. And then the other cool thing about logs to metrics is I can also click this estimate DPM. DPM stands for data points per minute. And it's our fancy name for metrics. Now, when you purchased Sumo Logic, you basically are getting charged based on what we expect your ingestion to be, how much data you're bringing into Sumo Logic. But with that ingestion, we allow you so many DPMs, part of your contract. And so here you can see how many DPMs you've purchased, and you can see if you're under budget or not. In our case, we're actually over budget. But this is an internal system, so I'm sure there's some funny money going on, but I don't really care. Okay, but here's how many you have, and then you can see how many this would cost you out of your available DPMs. I'll wager you, if you guys did a look on DPMs, many of you are not using anywhere close to the amount you're paying for. Okay. And then I could save this and off we go to the races. James, is there a question, sir?
Yeah, I looked to the left on my other screen here, and all of a sudden you're on a screen with check boxes, and I'm not quite sure how you got there.
Hang on. Let me see. Are you, if I scroll up, does this look familiar? Does it look familiar? Yes or no?
That's not where I'm at. I'm at the
Okay.
logs to metrics, metric rules, and metrics transformation.
Okay, so here metric rules, logs to metrics. And then I grabbed a new icon. I grabbed it, and that's what I did. I grabbed a new thing. And that's where this all comes from. Okay. So that's how that magic occurred. So I'm just showing you how logs to metrics work. How we can, when we ingest the logs, we can also create the metrics at the same time. And here in the lab, you'll find that when you ingest those logs, now you've got this new metric called size, And you can reference size. You can say in my query, I want to grab metric equals size, and I can display that on my metric fairly easily. Okay. Another thing that's in here that we don't have a lab for right now. Let me go and close up these labs if you don't mind. Close up these tabs. Another thing we have in here, again, under manage data, under metrics, is something called metric rules. Now you're going to find that we support 3 different types of metric formatting. We prefer this key value pair. This key value pair. That's what we prefer. It's called Carbon 2.0 format. We support that. No fuss, no muss. It's right there. But, and that's Carbon 2.0, key value pairs, key value pairs, key value pairs, and so forth and so on. But we also support Prometheus. And in Prometheus, my structure of where my metric is, its cluster, its node, whatever, the actual object, is in braces next to its parent object. So that's Prometheus. We support that. You can use that. And you can also convert from Prometheus to Carbon 2.0. You can also convert from graphite, which is a series of dotted notations, right? So my cluster, then into my node, then into my CPU, then into my CPU idle metric, and here's my value, and here's my timestamp. Okay. So you can use a dotted notation or graphite, and we can convert from graphite to Carbon 2.0. Now, in our metric tools, you can use these native syntaxes if you want. But obviously, if I can convert them all to key value pairs, it's going to make it a lot easier for your users. How do I create and make them into key value pairs? Again, under manage data, under metrics, under metric rules, you can add a metric rule, and I'm going to give you an example of one. This is graphite. It says travel dot namespace dot node dot pod dot type dot metric. That is the structure. And I can convert this by creating this where I say travel dot star dot star dot star dot star. And I specify, okay, the first star I come across is my namespace. So when it reads that line, it'll extract out namespace and say namespace equals whatever that value is. And then it will go to the next one, a node. Node equals whatever that value is. Pod equals whatever that value is. So it will automatically convert it to my Carbon 2.0 format. And then, of course, it will also identify that metric. So just wanted you to be aware that that exists in the product as well. Last conversation here into the metrics area is this metric transformation rule. You can, I can, we can create a metric for a specific reason, right? We want to create a metric to calculate our shipping weight, our shipping cost. We want to do something for tax rate, whatever. You can create metric transformation rules to create some calculations that you're going to create a metric that you can use forever and ever. So again, I might want to take my weight times 0.25 and say that that's my shipping cost or whatever. So you can create transformation rules here to create the kind of metrics that you might want on the fly. Now, the last thing we want to talk about here, and then we're going to wrap things up, is we can also use metrics to monitor things, right? You have a dashboard. I can put this dashboard up on my network operations center and I can see what's going on. That's one form of monitoring. It's not a great form of monitoring, but it's a good form of monitoring. It works. What I may want to do is I actually want to create a monitor. So in Sumo Logic, you can, again, go into manage data. This time you go into monitoring. And here under monitoring, I can create a new monitor. And this monitor could be based on a log query like you learned yesterday, or it could be based on a metric query. And so I can say, let's do this. Let me grab my CPU sys. Let me go ahead and grab my computer. So I've got some values in here. Let me make sure, there we go, my values. And so now I can write some rules about my system. And I want to be notified if something goes wrong with my system. So I have my expression as far as what I want. And by the way, this could be in basic mode or it could be in advanced mode, doesn't make any difference. Then as far as the trigger type, what if I'm missing data? What if the system goes down? I want you to notify me when it goes down. Oh, I also want you to notify me when it comes back. Thank you very much. I want to set a warning level, right? Right now, this is running at maybe 8%. So in reality, I'd maybe worry about a CPU running at maybe 80% or 70% or something like that. In this case, I'll make it 6% just to show you what happens here. Okay, so there is 6%. And then I can also recover when it gets down to less than 6%, or I can change it to a lower or higher value if I want by throwing this switch. And then I can say, look, notify me a critical warning, a critical alert, when maybe I get above, in this case, maybe 10% or something, right? In reality, if I'm talking about a CPU, I'm probably talking about 90-95% type thing. So you can create an alert that's going to notify you when things are abnormal. Now, down here under notifications, what do you want to do? Do you want to send an email? Do you want to send something out to Datadog? Do you want to send something out to Slack? Do you want to send something out to Microsoft Teams? Do you want to create a webhook? And you have the capability of creating webhooks into other systems like PagerDuty and various other systems. So you define how you want to send this notification. In the case of an email, who do I want to send it to? What do I want to use for subject lines? A combination of static and dynamic text. There's also some other dynamic variables here that I can use. I can type in whatever message I want. Now, do I want this message to fire when I'm missing data and I recover? When I have a warning, alert, and recover? What conditions do I want this stuff to fire? Maybe for warnings and missing data, I want to send the email. Maybe for something more serious, maybe I want to notify my teams through Slack or whatever. And so you decide what notifications you want to use and which conditions. Then you give this thing a name and you save it. And that's created an alert. Particularly powerful. Okay. All right, good. So that is lab number 9. That's the last lab with the exception of lab 10, where you can clean things up. So if you did install the collector, there's 2 things you got to do to remove the collector. One, in Sumo Logic, go ahead and find your collector. So again, you go to manage data, collection, do a search for your collector. Find your collector. And then you can delete that collector. And that will delete all the sources. Whoever JEP is, I can delete their source if I want to, but if you delete the collector, it's going to delete all the sources. So that's one thing. The second thing is you need to uninstall the software that you installed on your computer. So here, if you're on a Mac, as I mentioned before, you're going to go into your Finder and you're going to look in your applications folder, find the Sumo Logic collector, and there's an uninstaller app that you can double click on and it will uninstall your software. If you're on a Windows machine, you can go into your Windows control program, add remove programs, remove the Sumo Logic collector, choose uninstall, and off to the races that you go. If you're on a Unix machine, that's probably going to be a bit more work, right? You're going to be doing things in the terminal and having yourself a good old time, removing directories and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, you bet.
So sorry, I'll be honest with you, I haven't played much with the Unix collector, so you got me there. Any questions, ladies and gentlemen?
Yeah. First of all, everything was very explanatory, like how we set up this, all the metrics and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's lacking on like addressing Linux. And I do not believe that anyone is using Mac in production.
Okay.
So Linux side of the things was not covered well.
Eber, let me help you out here a little bit. I've taught this class probably 20, 25 times. And you're the first person that's made and pointed out about Linux. And don't get me wrong, you're not wrong. I agree with you. In a production environment, I'm not running my production environment on Macs. You're absolutely right. I'm probably not running on Windows machines. Okay, I'm probably running on a workhorse, which means it's probably a Unix or a Linux box. You are absolutely correct. But
Yeah,
that's not the way we structure these labs, because most of the people who install this are working off of their computers. And I don't know of too many people who are running around with Linux or Unix boxes.
No,
So-
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
In order to teach people, makes sense.
Yep.
To install the collector on your workstation.
Yep.
But doing enterprise,
I understand. I agree
you're
with you.
running Windows or Linux.
Yeah, no, I understand. I agree. By the way, one other thing too, and we have links in here, like I said, the collector uninstall process, it takes you into how to
Well, it's-
install and how to remove.
No, that's great.
And so
See,
their
I'm
documentation
using
should
Sumo
help you
Logic
out.
for 5 years.
I'm sorry?
So I'm using Sumo Logic for 5 years
Okay.
on a Linux environment.
Yep.
90% Linux. So we know how to install, uninstall, and everything else in this class was great. I have to review it again. I'm
Sure.
glad that I have like an access to actually do it again.
Mhm.
But honestly, my feedback is just a little bit more coverage on Linux.
The other thing I would mention to you, just to be, we want to be completely transparent. We want to be completely honest. So if you want to send an email to training@sumologic.com with your feedback on any course, we will gladly receive it.
Oh yeah, we'll do
That
it.
feedback's good, bad, indifferent, we don't care. We want your feedback. We are in it with our customers, so we want your help to make things better. So I would encourage you to feel free, if you got time, and feel free to put your comments down and send it to training@sumologic.com, any of you, by the way, and let us know. We appreciate that.
Yeah,
So
there is no bad feedback.
I
for
understand.
real.
Yeah, absolutely. There is no bad feedback. We want to improve things. We want to make things better. So, and I agree, in a production environment, I'm not setting things up on a Mac or a Windows machine. Maybe a Windows machine in a Azure environment or something, but not certainly not a PC.
And I got you. Linux is really tricky. So
Oh, it
it
is.
might be a different section
Yep.
of this whole thing.
And I'll confess,
Or
if
maybe
I
a
actually
course
had to
specifically
walk
for
through,
Linux.
if I have to walk through somebody how to install a collector on Linux with the UI installers, the various binary packages or whatever, and going through the hoops they have to go through, right? This could be painful. I mean, if you're obviously a experienced, seasoned Linux admin, this isn't too difficult. But
It is not.
a class full of folks, most people do not know Linux well. So, we try to use what we think the environment of our customers are going to have when they're taking a class. So appreciate
It's
your
fair enough, though.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Any other questions or comments or suggestions? What do you say if you guys want to? Again, you can take the exam. I'm going to warn you, it's a tough exam. A lot of lookups that you got to do. If you don't want to take the exam, you don't have to. I'm not holding the gun to anybody's head. But if you do want to take the exam, what you have to do is you want to go into your Sumo Logic environment, your training environment where you're logged in right now, and you want to log out. So down here, you open up your navigation panel, and down here where it says training plus admin, whatever number at Sumo Logic, you click on that, you click sign out. The reason being, we want you to take the exam with your name so you get credit for this. So you're going to log into your company's Sumo Logic environment where you have an account. And when you log in with your company's environment in your Sumo Logic account, you're going to go into the Home tab. And in the Home tab under Certification, on this Get Certified button, that's going to take you into our learning management system. And here under Get Certified is where our exams are. You click on Get Certified. And then in this case, you can take the metric mastery exam.
That is awesome. I just saw this earlier today, and I
Okay.
love it.
Good. Yeah, we
That
want
is
to make it easy.
available.
We want to make it easy for you guys. You can take these at any time. If you're at your convenience, that sort of thing. I will say that the fundamental certification is good for 2 years. The other certifications are all a year. And then
Yep.
also, if you're curious, and I know some folks are, back here where it talks about recorded live training, except for the metric class, all the other classes, I can go in and I can listen to a recording of that class. We'll fix the metric class here shortly. I can download the slides. I can download the student guide.
That's awesome.
So
That's exactly what I love about it.
Yep.
So
Yep.
we have access to that.
you have access to that. It's all
And
free.
honestly,
Yep.
the courses are free. We can try like so many times.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we encourage you to. I mean, and you're going to see that we will modify these courses and we will add some new content to them and all stuff. The product's constantly evolving. So we're constantly making changes and all that fun stuff. So
Not least though, I'm using this product for 5 years,
yeah.
and
You've
it's
seen the
really
change.
good one.
Yeah, you've seen the changes. You've lived the dream. In fact, if you remember the metric tool of about a year ago, that was a bit clunky. It did require some work. So hopefully you agree with me that the new improvements will make it easier for folks to use.
I like more the new policy of a contract, like the credit
Gotcha. Yep.
schema.
I understand. No, I
It
agree.
helped a lot.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. No, we want to help our customers be successful, not write them, burden them with bills. Okay. Our goal is to help you, not to hurt you. We are in it with our customers. True value. Anyway, so this is where you go in, like I said, get certified. You can take the exam. And if you want to, great, please feel free to. If you don't want to, then you can sign out of this WebEx. I'm going to turn my camera on one more time, again, to thank you all for attending. And if there's anything we can do for you, please let us know. One thing, if your company has about 10 folks or more that want training, again, you can send an email to training@sumologic.com or talk to your account executive, and we'll gladly schedule a training class for you. Right? We're trying to help you out. So anything we can do, please let us know. Otherwise, thanks for your hard work of the last couple hours and your hard work all week, actually. And want to say goodbye and wish you all the very best. Again, I'll be here for the next hour while you guys are taking the exam. But after that, hopefully we'll see you next week. So, for classes. Thanks. I'm going to stop the recording.